Hey, it's Chris Herbert, and welcome to my Monday morning podcast for March the 24th, 2025. This is podcast number 4 of my 90-day experiment, and the view count so far in my past 3 podcasts let me see, we have 17 views from the March 10th one, 48 views for the March 3rd one, and 10 views from last week's. So what is that, 48, 58, 68, so we're at 64 views so far, and part of the, I'm laughing because I was talking to my youngest daughter yesterday about my podcast, and she thought it was just hilarious that I was keeping track of the views and the fact that the numbers are just shattering, already hitting Mr. Beast type of numbers. So what's kind of interesting about this too is I have a family member who's, I'm not going to mention their name, but let's just say they're a family member who is extremely gifted and talented, a lot younger than me, who has been creating some interesting videos on YouTube, and the view count for for his videos, we're not talking thousands, in some cases talking tens of thousands, if not more. So, um, so this kind of leads to my first thing I want to talk about today, and this was inspired by my youngest daughter yesterday, because I've always sort of not known what I want to talk about, and this notion of, producing content for the sake of producing content because you should, and because, with the hope of, achieving some sort of broader goal, whether it's to establish your own brand or build your own following. It's kind of on the minds of not everybody for sure, but, people will look at influencers and podcasters and YouTubers and think, well, maybe I should do a channel, and especially when it comes to marketing and when it comes to trying to generate awareness around yourself or around your business. So it's kind of my job to understand how to do that through my agency, and I'm just naturally curious, so I've got a rural entrepreneur podcast. I have an AI podcast series that I now produce for Area 81, which is an entrepreneur accelerator program I've launched with 3 other entrepreneurs. But like I said, for these particular podcasts, I mean, it was pretty much inspired by Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast. And like I said, I'm kind of ripping off his idea, and he's had this thing going for years. Anyway, so the first thing I want to talk about today is the idea that I'm still struggling to find out what to talk about. Think about the irony of that one. So I've asked my youngest daughter, I says, well, if there was something that you had on your mind that you thought I might be able to answer for you, what would it be? Or what should I talk about, So I'm seeking potential audience feedback, because I don't think she's listened to any of them so far, which is funny in and of itself. So she said, well, why don't you talk about some of the antics you did when you were a youngster? And I was thinking to myself, okay, well, we all do kind of interesting, sometimes crazy things when we're kids. So how would I do that without it being overly self-serving, and how would anybody really care about what I did when I was a kid? And I think pretty much the story around that is, what did you do as a kid, and what are your kids doing as kids, and um, how all these things, especially things you remember that you did as a kid, um, whether they had some sort of influence on your life, hopefully positive, although that's not always the case, right? I mean, all of the things that happen to us when we're young do accumulate and sort of build you into the person you are today to some degree, or at least that's what I believe. Now, I'm not a psychologist and psychiatrist or even a sociologist, but we all remember the things that happened to us and that we did when we were very young. So I'm going to tell 2 or 3 stories, and they're stories that it's like they're juxtaposition stories in some cases. So here's one. So when I was a kid, I was at my friend's apartment. It was winter. We were outside. And we had skates on. I have no idea why we had skates on in the parking lot of an apartment, but we were having fun. And maybe I was 10, 11, I don't know. So I decided to skate down a hill. I have no idea how steep it was. I just remember that the outcome was is I fell over and I really badly hurt my leg. I couldn't get up. Somehow, I ended up being back in my friend's apartment, and I was telling my friend's parents that, I think my leg's broken. There's just something not right. And what I remember is that they didn't believe me, but somehow I was able to convince them at some point in time, or they were able to see, that there was something really not right. So we took we headed out to the hospital, and I ended up coming back with a cast. So I think what happened with that, and a couple other incidences of craziness, was the importance of when you say something to somebody that they believe you, and that's a lot tougher in today's day and age. When you see something or watch something or read something that somebody says, whether you believe them or not. So this has actually been a thing that's kind of affected me all my life, is if somebody doesn't believe me, I get upset. Now, if I'm wrong about something, I'd be the first person to admit it. Okay, so another story, which has shaped my life quite a bit, is when I was about the same age. I want to say, I'm not sure whether I broke my leg. Yeah, I broke my leg before I went to boarding school. So part of our family tradition, on my dad's side, was, we all went to boarding school, and I'm originally from the UK. So we went to, these preparatory schools. So we were living in Canada at that time, so it was a really strange experience, because I had to fly to England and attend school and be away from my family for, in some cases, the one stint, it was like 6 months. And then I would fly home, spend time with my family, and then have to fly back to spend the next semester. It was such a weird experience, because, I went from, the typical school experience that Canadians experienced back in the 70s to a totally different educational system, and also, different culture, different country. And I remember the first time, I got there, the first day I arrived, I was getting off the bus and walking towards the area, I guess, where they were going to process me and other kids We were going to the school, and the person asked my name, and I said, "It's Chris." I said, "No, no." And they said, "Well, what's your name? Your last name?" "Herbert." And from there on, I was known as Herbert. I wasn't known as Chris. And quite a flip, and quite an abrupt flip. I had to wear, uniforms, and my parents weren't anywhere near. My mother and sister obviously were in another country. So lots of stories that happened out of that. One was I started a basketball league. Conkers was this really interesting game that I loved, where you get a chestnut and you put a piece of string through it, and then you basically play against somebody else who was a conqueror. You try to you alternate. You hit each other's conkers. Kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like I can't think of the word, but essentially, you probably understand what I mean. Is you take turns hitting each other's conkers on the string, and whoever outlasts the other one, then you win, and your win count increases. So I took some model paint and painted my conker to protect it. And it was probably the most winningest conker at the school. But it had this gold hinge to it, or tinge to it, I should say. So everyone would be asking me, how come your conker looks different? And I just said it was from a different tree, blatantly lying. So you contrast that to me not being believed when I thought I broke my leg, to me lying to somebody to get them to believe me. How did that shape your life, Chris? I don't know, but yeah, like I guess these stories, these experiences that you have as a kid, or the experiences that your kids are having now, shape their lives, right? And if I take those simple two incidences that happened in my life, and try to make sense of how they might have helped shape me to where I am today, I would say that I'm innovative. I think differently. When I'm faced with challenges like going to another country, I know how to adapt. I have to adapt, but I also have to stand out. And that's certainly something that I've noticed in my life. Now, I don't necessarily have to stand out to the extent that, I have a massive following anywhere. But I certainly want to stand out, and I want to make a difference, and I want to be known, and I want to help people. So I continue to try to do that, and I will until the day I die. Okay, so what else can I talk to today? Oh, what a weekend. Great weekend. And odd. I played in Ontario squash provincial championships in the over 60 category. Won my first round. And then I had a really weird experience with the next guy I played, who, according to the draw sheet, he was American. So on the draw sheet, on a tournament, you basically have a breakdown of all the players. You can see who's playing against each other, who wins, who loses, that sort of stuff. And in this case, he had an American flag beside his name. So I thought to myself, well, this might be interesting, given what's happening with the current U.S. administration wanting to annex Canada. Trade wars and tariffs is one thing, but when somebody, regardless of who they are, threatens to take your country, it sort of changes the way you feel, or changes the way I feel about that person. And unfortunately, about, in this case, what this game of squash would be like, believe it or not. So, and what really made me think about this, so let me back up. So it wasn't really that big a deal that the guy was from the U.S. It was interesting. Um, but what happened when he walked on court to play me is he handed me a headband from his U.S. squash club, and it had, you know, the name of the squash club and what state it was from. And he just, before we even started warming up, he handed it to me and says, "Oh, just a little memento or gift. You don't have to wear it while we're playing today, but just a gift for you." And that, believe it or not, as meaningless as a gesture like that, took on a whole different perspective for me. I am going to fight for this country in any way I can. And when this person handed me that, I thought, why would you do that? I mean, in my 40 years of playing squash, two things have never happened. The first one is the President of the United States has never threatened to annex Canada. The second one is nobody's ever given me a memento before playing in the squash match. Nobody's ever handed me a gift. So those two situations existing today that culminated into my game on Saturday with this person from the U.S. triggered me to no end. So we played the match, and he beat me fair and square. It was 3-1. It was a good match. There was a typical, gamesmanship and competitiveness. Some contentious calls. Some appreciation for the other person, for him, hitting a good shot, and giving him recognition for it, vice versa. So typical squash game. So afterwards, shook hands. There's a small gallery of players watching our match. I sat down, getting my breath, drinking some water, and he was just a little bit over on the other side of the gallery, sitting there recovering, and he had two or three, I think he had his wife and maybe his brother and maybe his son who were there cheering him on, which was really cool. So I took the headband and went back up to him and said, "Look, until your president stops threatening to annex Canada, I can't accept this gift." So I gave it back to him, and he looks at me and says, "I am Canadian." And I went, "Okay, well, it has you have a U.S. flag beside your name in the draw sheet, so I assumed you're from Canada." He says, "I'm Canadian." That's a bad assumption. I said, "Well, I still don't want the headband." But for some reason, one of the I guess his son maybe took offense to the fact that I was having this conversation and expressing my concerns, about what was happening in the U.S. And he stood up and told me to shut my mouth, and didn't approach me, but started implying that he wanted to fight. Now, I don't back down from anything, but I'm not a fighter either. So I guess it was the other three got in between him and me. Now, I was not approaching him. I just went back and sat down and drank my water and was watching this whole thing unfold. And I said to him, "Come and talk to me. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. Because isn't really that what we should be doing? It's talking about what's happening with Trump and what people in the U.S. are trying to do and trying to deal with, and also the same way here in Canada." So if you were to deconstruct this whole thing, I'm thinking, okay, well, if they are Canadian, and now all of a sudden this is a battle because I wanted to give a headband back. Now you could argue that, hey, what was a headband? What's the big deal? It was a big deal to me. And it's my right to express how I feel about things, and I felt that that was not something that I was willing to accept. I thought it was actually quite inappropriate and tone deaf. Anyway, so it's kind of interesting. I guess somebody went and got one of the tournament organizers to settle things down, and yeah, that was it. But it turns out that this gentleman who I played has been living and working in the U.S. for 15 years as a financial advisor. So I really question, to some degree, yeah, maybe he's a Canadian citizen, but you know what? He left Canada. He doesn't, for whatever reason, he's staying in the U.S., and that's fine. But how loyal are you to our country if you don't even want to stay here and work here? I say the same thing to people that, this is a tough thing to say because, as a Canadian, you have the right to go and work anywhere you want, right? But I choose to stay and work and want to stay in Canada. I've had opportunities to work in the U.S. and I have worked in the U.S. But I guess if I look at some of the Canadians who have gone to the U.S. and who are staying there, my question now is, are you thinking about coming back? And how much does it matter to you, that you stay in Canada or stay in the U.S.? Now I have friends in Canada, in the U.S. So if I criticize Kevin O'Leary, for going on CNN and being, quite honestly, a dick, and cashing in on, opportunity through the U.S. because there's more money to be made. Who am I to tell him what he should be doing in his life as a Canadian? But really, are you Canadian? If you don't live in Canada and be part of Canada, how is it that you are 100% Canadian? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's a tough one. It really is a tough one. I think of all these celebrities, like Mike Myers with his elbows up thing, going on a Saturday Night Live, and, like, Mike, are you going to come back to Canada? Like, or is it better for you to be in the U.S. still, and Martin Short and other people who, I love Martin Short. Like, I mean, they went to the U.S. because there's more opportunity. I get it. But maybe we need to think about, well, why isn't there opportunity in Canada in such a way that people feel they have to leave? And then they feel that they have to stay, and they never want to come back. And the only time their pride in their country surfaces is when there's a threat that is going to be acquired or annexed or seized by a dick. I know this is heavy stuff, but it's time to really reflect on what it really means to be Canadian and where we're going to take this country as Canadians. And if you have to go somewhere else to become a star, to make enough money, to make more money, because Canada can't provide that to you, and I'm not just talking about actors and comedians and entrepreneurs and financial advisors. I am talking about the people that are going to Safe and Sound in downtown Owen Sound, who are homeless, who need help, who are on the outs. I'm talking about the average Canadian as well. I'm talking about the majority of Canadians. I'm talking about nurses. I'm talking about young people working in restaurants trying to figure out what they're going to fucking do in their lives, who perhaps feel hopeless that they don't really know how to get to where they need to go. And I am not talking about making the most amount of money. I'm talking about making enough money enough money so that we only have to have one job and it's paid well enough. Not and well enough means, hey, I can take my kid to school. Hey, I can enjoy downtime. Hey, I don't have to make a decision between whether I can afford to pay for food or pay for rent. Because I got news for us all here that this is what the bottom line is right now when it comes to um, what Canada needs to do. And just imagine if we're having this problem in terms of inequality, and at the same time, the President of the United States sees Canada as a land of opportunity, who is a billionaire, who has ripped people off. Think about the disconnect. So for the foreseeable future, no, for the rest of my life, I am going to be part of the change in a little way, in a big way, whatever way I can take, so that my grandsons, my daughters, your grandsons, your daughters, your sons, your fathers, your mothers, your grandmothers, your grandfathers all have the opportunity to live a fulfilling life. And unfortunately, the economics of it is a critical part that is, it's tragic. You know, I just, so here I am. So I'm going to rebound back to my, when I decided to skate down a hill. So maybe I'm skating down a hill now, through these podcasts, on skates, going downhill as fast as possible to help change. So I don't know, maybe in more podcasts in the future I'll be talking about it. I'll probably be talking about some people who I watch on YouTube in particular, who are fantastic human beings. Some American, many of them American, who are, I would argue, are the voice of the majority of Americans in terms of what they're seeing. And again, this isn't about political stripes. It's not whether you're Democrat, Republican, Liberal, NDP, Conservative, Green Party, Bloc Québécois. It's about where we're going to take our country, where the U.S. is going to take their country, in a direction that is going to be in the best interest of the majority. And the majority are the people who are not making enough money, who are being subjected to cuts, who are being used, I think, as pawns to help put more money into the pockets of rich people. Am I rich? No. Have I done okay in my life? Yes. But I can tell you that it's my responsibility, and everyone's, is to make it so that all of us move forwards in a way that we have the opportunity that we deserve, and that we help people out in terms of creating opportunity for themselves. And I'll be blogging about it on the MI6 site, in the context of entrepreneurship. But at the heart of all of this, and the core of what makes me tick when I was a young person, is, getting through the day-to-days in order to be successful, to be happy, and not at the expense of other people, but with other people. So that's pretty heavy for today. Yeah, thank you for listening. So I hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.